They heard it once and they rejected it. It didn't sound right. It didn't fit with what they knew. So they dismissed it and moved on. Then they heard it again. This time, something was different. It still didn't feel true, but it felt familiar. Later, they heard it again, from another source, in another context, on another day. And slowly, the resistance faded. Nothing about the statement changed. No new evidence appeared. No logic was added. But it stopped sounding like a lie. The human brain has a weakness. It doesn't only believe what is true, it believes what feels familiar. This isn't a failure of intelligence. It isn't caused by a lack of education. It's a feature of how the brain evolved. Your brain was designed to keep you alive, not to fact-check everything you hear. In the environments humans evolved in, repetition usually meant importance. If you heard something often, it was probably worth paying attention to. That system still runs today. But in a world flooded with information, it can be exploited. Psychologists began noticing something strange. People were believing things they had once rejected. Not opinions, not emotional arguments. Simple, factual statements that were objectively false. So researchers designed controlled experiments to understand why this was happening. Participants were shown a list of statements. Some were true, some were false. Nothing dramatic. No political messaging. No emotional language. At first, the results were predictable. People correctly rejected the false statements. They rated them as inaccurate. They showed confidence in their judgments. Then the experiment continued. Later, the same statements appeared again. Mixed casually with new ones, no warnings, no emphasis. Some statements appeared once more. Others appeared several times across different sessions. The participants weren't asked to memorize them. They weren't pressured to change their answers. The only variable was repetition. When participants were tested again, something unexpected happened. The false statements that had been repeated were now rated as more believable. Not all of them, not instantly, but enough to reveal a clear pattern. The more often a false statement was repeated, the more likely people were to accept it as true, even when they had rejected it before, even when they knew it was false. This wasn't persuasion. No one argued with them. No one convinced them. The statements didn't become more logical. They simply became familiar. And familiarity changed everything. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. It describes the brain's tendency to treat repeated information as more accurate than new information. Not because it is correct, but because it is easier to process. When your brain encounters something familiar, it processes it faster. That speed creates a subtle sense of ease, and the brain mistakes that ease for truth. This process happens automatically. You don't decide to believe the lie. You don't notice the shift happening. Your brain quietly lowers its guard. Each repetition reduces resistance. And over time, the idea feels less threatening, less questionable, less false. One of the most unsettling discoveries was that intelligence didn't protect people. Highly educated participants were just as vulnerable. People trained in critical thinking were still affected. Even when participants were warned that some statements were false, repetition continued to increase belief. Knowing about the effect didn't stop it, because this isn't a conscious choice, it's a cognitive shortcut. Your brain uses shortcuts constantly to save energy. Evaluating every claim logically would be exhausting. So instead of asking, "Is this true?" the brain often asks simpler questions. Have I heard this before? Does this feel familiar? Does it sound right? If the answer is yes, skepticism drops. This is why repetition is more powerful than persuasion. Persuasion invites debate. Repetition invites acceptance. Advertising understands this. Ads don't convince you by proving a product is superior. They convince you by showing it again and again until it feels normal. Political messaging works the same way. Slogans are repeated until they sound obvious. Not because they are true, but because they are familiar. This is also why misinformation spreads so easily. Facts are often complex. They require attention and effort. Lies are simple. Short, easy to repeat. and every repetition strengthens familiarity. Eventually, the lie feels true. The most dangerous lies aren't shocking or dramatic. They are quiet, casual, repeated without urgency. They slip past your defenses because they don't trigger alarm. They don't feel like lies. They feel familiar. The illusory truth effect also explains why correcting misinformation is so difficult. Repeating a false claim, even to debunk it, can reinforce it. Each repetition strengthens memory, and memory strengthens belief. By the time a correction appears, the lie already feels right, and unfamiliar truth feels wrong. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Truth has to fight familiarity, and familiarity usually wins. This doesn't mean the brain is broken. It means it's efficient. Repetition once signaled reliability. If you heard something often, it was likely important. The problem is that modern systems exploit this shortcut. Technology allows repetition on a massive scale. The brain hasn't adapted. Social media feeds repeat ideas. Headlines repeat framing. Conversations repeat assumptions. And beliefs form quietly. Not through reasoning, but through exposure. This is why belief isn't always a choice. You can reject something at first, you can doubt it later, you can question it repeatedly. But with enough repetition, resistance fades. Not because you want it to, but because it feels easier. The real danger isn't hearing a lie once. It's hearing it repeatedly, without interruption, without challenge. That's when belief forms. This leads to an uncomfortable question. How many of your beliefs exist because they are true? And how many exist because they were repeated? How many ideas feel obvious only because you've heard them often? The illusory truth effect doesn't mean you can't think critically, but it means you must be deliberate. You must slow down, question, familiarity, resist ease. Ask not, does this feel right? But, why does this feel right? Because the most dangerous lies don't sound false. They sound familiar, and the brain is always listening. So the final question isn't whether lies can become believable. Psychology has already answered that. The real question is this. If you heard a lie enough times, from enough places, in enough ways, would you believe it too? This was a human file.